Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Deep Roots Native Plant webinar. We've got a great show for you today. And before I begin, I've got a couple announcements to make. So today's show is going to be about spring ephemerals at Lexington Lake Park with Johnson County Parks and Recreation District. And this is, like I said, it's going to be a great show. And first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Johnson County Parks and Recreation District, for making this program possible, and donors like you as well. If you enjoyed today's show, join me live at Lexington Lake this Saturday at 9 a.m. We still have a few spots left in our guided naturalist walk, where we'll meet over in the parking lot over by the prairie area in the lake, and we'll make our way into the woods to check out some spring ephemerals. If we get rained out this weekend, we will be rescheduling to the following Saturday. If you want to learn from the earth, you can also join me at our Discover Native Gardening sessions 3 times a month at the Anita B. Gorman Conservation Discovery Center. Our next session on Earth Day is full, but we have openings on our May 6th event from 9 to 11 a.m. This is a great opportunity to learn seasonal skills to maintain your native garden. All experience levels are welcome, and we get tons of people who either have a lot of experience or who've never gardened before. So go ahead and join us for a fun educational time. As always, this webinar will be recorded. The resources will be available to you online following today's show. Don't forget, drop your comments in the chat and put your questions in the Q&A. At the end of this session, Matt Garrett, the Natural Resource Manager for Johnson County Parks, will be joining me for a riveting Q&A. So if you have questions about spring ephemerals, native plants in general, hiking, and where to go in Johnson County to view the beauty and wonders of nature, be sure to stick around till the end. And while we're at it, go ahead and visit us online at deeproots.org, where you can find information on upcoming events, webinars, native gardening resources, and how you can get involved. While you're there, consider making a donation. Okay, I'd like to go ahead and welcome Mr. Matt Garrett, the Natural Resource Manager for Johnson County Parks and Recreation District, to the virtual stage. How's it going, Matt?
Good. Glad to be here today with you.
Yeah, it's so good to be here with you too. So you all may have seen Matt on some of our previous episodes. We have a really great partnership with Johnson County Parks and Recreation District, where Matt and I and his natural resource team get to go out and visit these parks around Johnson County, take a hike, and film the areas so that we can bring these special programs to you all. And then following those hikes, we get to do these awesome in-person guided naturalist walks. So Matt joined me at Lexington Lake Park just a week or so ago, and we saw tons of spring ephemerals. But I have a really hard-hitting question for you, Matt. And I would also like for our audience to chime in the chat, their response to this as well. So Matt, if you were a spring ephemeral, what would you be and why?
I like them all. But I'd say I'd be Bellwort. I grew up in Excelsior Springs, and Isley Woods is a really special place with lots of wildflowers. I think it's a Missouri natural area, and that's one of the first places I got to see Bellwort blooming. And so, it's kind of my hometown, and I love thinking about that flower on those slopes at Isley Woods. So that's another neat spot to see.
That is a really great answer and a very cool park. I have been there. It's been a couple of years since I visited. I know Casey Wildlands did a conservation crawl there recently, which was very cool. But there's tons of bloodroot there, which is just like wild to see in this little semi-urban like park. It's right there in town. I guess not urban, but you know what I mean. It's just like right there in the city center. So.
Yeah, stunning natural area.
Yeah. So folks, let us know what spring ephemeral would you be and why in the chat. This time around, I've changed my answer a few times, but I think I'd pick the spring beauty because it has really cute pink pollen. And if you all could see my office right now, I have a lot of pink accents in here. So anyway, and I'm short, so there's that too. Okay, so we have a great show for you today. And folks, if you have questions for Matt or myself about native plants, native landscaping, spring ephemerals, go ahead and put those in the Q&A throughout the program. And Matt will join me back on the virtual stage then to continue our conversation. So thank you, Matt. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Well, hello. Sydney Ross of Deep Roots here. Did you know there's nature right at our doorsteps in the Kansas City area? Today's episode is all about the fleeting nature of spring in our woodlands. I recently walked with Johnson County Parks and Recreation District's Natural Resource Team at Lexington Lake Park near DeSoto, Kansas. As we went from rocky outcroppings to wet bottomland woods, we saw tons of spring ephemeral flowers among the variety of habitat. And if you're wondering what Dutch clothing, ants, and circle dancing have in common, I suggest you stick around for this great Deep Roots episode. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Matt Garrett, Natural Resource Manager for the Johnson County Park and Recreation District, and we're here at Lexington Lake Park today. It's a 465-acre park near DeSoto, Kansas, and it's really unique. It has an interesting mixture of prairie and one of the larger intact forests in Johnson County. So on the south end of the property, we have federally threatened Mead's milkweed out in an open prairie. North end of the property, we have bluffs covered in bloodroot and ephemeral wildflowers. So a spring ephemeral is a wildflower that seizes the moment in between winter and summer. There's just this brief window before the leaf canopy kind of consumes the forest, and these plants all reproduce and live their whole life cycle in a really short window. And they're on the forest floor, and they have more unique pollinators, and they have just this brief moment in time where they're able to, complete their life cycle. And they have a lot of threats from invasive species and a lot of former overuse of land that makes them really special to see today. Here at Lexington, this is one of our only populations of bloodroot in Johnson County parks. We're kind of on the edge of its range. And Dutchman's breeches and Virginia waterleaf and false ruin anemone. And we should see some interesting tree species on this Kansas River bluff. So we're on a bluff overlooking the Kansas River. We can see all the way to Leavenworth County from where we're going to be today. So it'll have some interesting diversity of plants and maybe some animals we'll see today.
My name is Ellen Bruce. I'm a seasonal natural resource technician for Johnson County Parks and Recreation District. I really like the Dutchman's breeches because of the shape of the flower and the leaves. It's very fairy-esque.
So one of the really interesting things about being at Lexington Lake Park are all of the historic structures. And so across this park, there are old foundations that predate most of the development in Johnson County. This area is called Crozier's Station, and we have an agricultural census from the 1870s that says how many orchards and how many pigs and how many cows are in this area and how much prairie was on the site. And it was a train location, it was a train stop, and we've got old images of the site. And so there are multiple wells, there are multiple basement structures, and one of the more interesting things is a spring box we're going to see today. And so it says it was one of the strongest springs in the county in the 1870s, and we can climb down into it and see water still pouring out of the hillside today. So this is one of the cooler spots in the county to see American bladdernut. It's got these beautiful hanging white flowers on it. It's an understory woodland shrub that really likes moist woodlands. And it's kind of interesting because we're on a limestone slab rock shelf here with chinkapin oak, but there's lots of moist loving species in here. And it's got these really interesting kind of inflated fruits that it'll have later in the season. That are really wild to look at. So it's a neat shrub that we don't typically see outside of the eastern third of Kansas. And it's a neat one in our park system to see this understory tree. We're further down the base of the slope of this Kansas River bluff. And we just came across a large colony of trout lilies. And so generally you're gonna see this mottled trout-like leaf. And it's absolutely stunning when it's backlit like it is right now. And then you're going to see this beautiful flower that is currently closed and it is not quite open. Here's another one, absolutely stunning. You're going to see 2 or 3 flowers in a large colony. And they can be harvested traditionally, but you want to make sure that you really understand the context of the landscape and the rules of the land that you're on, and make sure that if you are looking to sustainable harvest anything within a park or a natural area, you understand the context and the reproduction of the plant and whether it's appropriate or lawful in that region, to make sure that if you are harvesting anything in a woodland, that you're following the rules of the park system that you're in. And adjacent to that, we've got a plethora of other species. So it's amazing to see this understory. We've got oak leaf litter, we've got acorn caps, we've got Dutchman's breeches, we've got toothwort. We have all these different species that are just an absolute, profusion of blooms right now in this understory. And we're underneath a canopy of oaks and hackberries, and it's a beautiful spot.
Reciprocity and accountability are key when it comes to being a good land steward. Enjoy the fruits of the forest, but understand when a plant or fruit is needed more in the landscape than it is in our own baskets. I'd like to follow Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer's idea of the honorable harvest. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever. Managing non-native invasive species is one of the ways to support our native lands, and garlic mustard is a great example of removing and enjoying an invasive plant through foraging.
Invasive species at Lexington Lake is kind of a 50-50 between the prairie and the woods, and luckily, due to staff and the location of the park, bush honeysuckle is not a major threat here. We can visit here occasionally and just find hot spots and remove it. And we deal with more woody invasion on the prairies. But the honeysuckle is a managed threat right now. Our biggest issue would be garlic mustard in the understory here of the forest. But with volunteer work days and some staff work, this park's in generally pretty good health. We've had a huge success with hand removal of garlic mustard with volunteers. This spring, KC Wildlands wanted to do a work day in a historically rank spot of garlic mustard, and we couldn't find any. So having 3 or 4 years of hard hand pulling by 6th, 7th, 8th graders, and we have seen the species disappear. That once it's kind of overstocked and it lives out its life cycle and gets hand pulled for a couple seasons, we really see it vanquish. It's not something we use herbicide on, so just volunteer labor seems to really help us with these hotspots. So an important control method for garlic mustard is if you hand pull it, don't leave it in the trail, especially if it's already got a bloom on it or it's about to go to seed. It could reroot or it could still expel a seed, so you really want to take it out with you. We tend to bag it and put it in trucks and send it off to compost or to a landfill, and make sure that it leaves the park if you can. Get it into a trash can or a bag.
Ephemeral here is called bloodroot, and it has a bright red sap that can leak from the rhizome, and traditionally it has been used to decorate baskets and mats, and it has also been used as a face paint. It is toxic to eat, so mammals stay clear. The Dutchman's breeches here has a lysome on the seed, which is a fatty coating that ants will actually take the seed in and eat away the lysome, and then they will discard the seed, and that's how it's dispersed.
Myrmecochory is an interesting mutualistic relationship between plants and ants. Seeds from bloodroot, trillium, and wild ginger have a yummy appendage attached to the outside called lysomes. This food source is rich in lipids, proteins, and other nutrients that ants find irresistible. This attraction benefits the plant and ants as the ants remove seeds and take them to their colonies, effectively planting the seed. This is a crucial seed dispersal technique that benefits the ant with food in return. Oh, and did I mention that Myrmecochory roughly translates to ant circular dance from ancient Greek and Roman languages? How cool is that?
Cutleaf toothwort is in the mustard family, and it is the host plant to the Virginia white butterfly. Unfortunately, there is a species that looks pretty similar to it that the butterfly has confused it with, and it has caused the population to decline. But it is a very pretty plant, and allegedly the roots of it can be ground up and has a similar taste to horseradish. So the species of plant that the Virginia white butterfly confuses for the cutleaf toothwort is garlic mustard, which we talked about pulling up by the roots and making sure to not leave it in the parks. It's actually toxic to caterpillars, which is why it is not great for the species.
So this is a really special location, and this is not somewhere that we generally advertise, so this is for a video. And we ask that when you are visiting Lexington Lake Park that you do stay on the trails, and so this is a unique digital experience. And so right here we have Crozier Spring, And so this is a spring box. So this is a pioneer spring box made out of limestone. And that in the 1860s and 70s, it said it was the strongest spring in the county. And this at one point was an agricultural development, and you know, the forest has taken it back. And the spring is still flowing today, and it's pretty hard to find nice springs in the county. And so this is just a really special place, and it is surrounded by wildflowers. So it's really critical that you observe this from a distance. The entire spring box is surrounded by bloodroot, toothwort, Dutchman's breeches. Multiple steps in this area do damage all these wildflowers. So this, as I can say again, is a digital experience, and we really don't want folks going into the spring or getting close to the spring. So let's enjoy it on the video. This is an absolutely gorgeous yellow-violet Viola pubescens, and it's growing directly out of a limestone crack. It's absolutely wild to see that. We only see them in the eastern third of Kansas, and it's one of our first flowers in the springtime. It's stunning to see all these plants just doing the best they can in these little chunks of soil they find on this slope on the Kansas River. Got gooseberry there, another little shrubby friend growing right out of a crack on this slope. We've got acorns that are just lingering in here, and we're gonna have columbine in here shortly. And so yeah, all of these plants are just finding minute amounts of soil to hang on this rocky slope here. All right, so this is an interesting habitat where we had at some point a creek that was flowing through a beautiful prairie glade habitat, and at some point a lake was made up the slope before JCPenney purchased the property. And then probably a couple hundred years ago, the railroad actually ran a rail line on the outflow of this valley. And so we have like a silver maple swamp here. It's really interesting. There's nothing that I know of it like in the county. And so when you look around, we have enormous maples, enormous hackberries that just have beautiful amphibian habitat. And so I've heard narrowmouth toads down here, and it's just absolutely wonderful amphibian habitat. We're lucky it's a little dry this season and we can be standing where we are. Usually there could be 6 inches of water on this spot, but it's just an absolutely stunning valley. We would expect maybe prothonotary warblers to be nesting in this zone as well. And so it's just a very unique wet landscape that we rarely see in eastern Kansas and our really rocky, dry hillsides and open upland prairies. And so it's just unique to come over a hill and see a wetland silver maple kind of bottomland, which is just not something that you're going to see. And if we pivoted and we could look on the other side of this tree line, we would see historically probably a giant wet prairie and a meandering Kansas River. And so you can only imagine at some point, if you were visiting this bluff, that you would have seen just open prairie and this, a Kansas River that was moving between the banks between Johnson and Lebanon, North County. But we're still lucky to have this amazing space today. We just left our silver maple bottomland, and we came up a little bit up the slope, and we found another species that likes its feet wet, and we have ourselves a pawpaw bloom. Absolutely gorgeous goth bloom. So most flowers are white and point to the sky and have all these bright colors, and pawpaw has a different evolutionary route. And so they're going to have a mildly unpleasant odor that's going to attract flies and that are generally going to pollinate them. And we're going to have fruits that are edible on the pawpaw in September. And that's going to be a delicious fall treat. But the blooms are absolutely stunning and a unique find when you're in an understory in the month of April. And really only the eastern third of Kansas, like a lot of these wildflowers. Once it gets drier and you lose these wetter soils that you see across eastern the United States, you really get towards the Flint Hills and the pawpaw is going to go away.
Yeah.
Give us a description.
Kind of, I don't know. Just kind of stinky.
Hey, it was awesome to have a re-glimpse of Lexington Lake Park. So folks, this is a little taste of what you can expect for our in-person guided naturalist walk this Saturday. And like I mentioned earlier, we still have spots available for you to sign up through our website. Welcome back, Matt. Good to see you again.
Glad to be here.
And we've got a few questions here in the Q&A. And also, folks, if you have questions, not just about Lexington Lake Park, but spring ephemerals in general, or your garden in spring, let us know. Matt also has an amazing native garden outside of his office and at his house. And as someone who works with large landscape, he knows quite a bit about native plants. So feel free to shoot us your questions in the Q&A and we'll go ahead and get started. So first, Pam is asking, where is Lexington Lake?
Yeah, so Lexington Lake is in a really rapidly developing part of Johnson County. And so it is on the western boundary of DeSoto, Kansas. And K10 highway, like on your way to Lawrence, is just on the south side of the park. So it really is kind of the western buffer of the city of DeSoto.
Nice. Yeah, it's I feel like there's a few really great Johnson County parks like right in that area too. I know Kill Creek Park isn't too far from there. Neither is Cedar Niles. At least for me, someone who's from KC kind of thinking generally that area, it feels like it's pretty easy to get to some really great sites over there.
Yeah, I think in the next couple years, we'll actually have a paved trail that'll go from Kill Creek North into the city of DeSoto.
Mm.
And then you could walk from Lexington on a sidewalk, get on the Kill Creek Streamway, and then walk all the way to Kill Creek Park from Lexington. So that'll be exciting in a couple seasons when we have that connection between those two parks.
Awesome. So at Lexington Lake, we saw was it called Crozier Spring, and Anita was asking, what was that spring box used for? Is it to store food? Is it to drink from? Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about what a spring box is and how it might have been utilized?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about historic preservation, but I know that that would have been the water source for the local homestead. And generally, the principle would be that it's a water storage device where you're keeping contamination from animal waste from the agricultural animals on site. And it's got an overflow pipe you can actually see on the back end once it fills up. And so it would have been used for the homestead for fresh water. And I'm not sure if it had a roof on it and, they kept things cool in there. I know for sure that the spring box was used for water for the site and for the cattle and sheep and all the other critters that they had at Crozier's station.
Nice. It was really cool to see that the water still comes out of that spring. And what folks you didn't get to see during our film today, but when we were walking over there, some birds had been down in there. I think it was it a Phoebe.
It was a Phoebe looking for a nesting location.
So cool. So definitely still supporting a lot of residents there in the woods. So very cool. John is asking, are there red buds in this park and are they considered a native plant?
Yeah, so we didn't focus a lot of our time on the red buds when we were there, but yeah, there's a lot of red bud once you get away from the slope on the Kansas River. So the drier kind of uplands in that park have some beautiful red buds, and they are native. And if you don't have a nut allergy, they're fun to taste. If you want to eat the blooms, we're kind of losing that window right now. But yeah, red buds are an important understory species in a lot of our forests here in Johnson County.
I also feel like they're just very iconic for the Midwest. Like when I think of springtime, like in Kansas City, I think of red buds. So yeah, it's one of my favorite understory trees for sure.
Yeah, it looked like a cloud almost. You had this beautiful pink layer through the entire forest as you looked, and they were just all about the same height and created a really nice kind of contrast with the rest of the forest.
So kind of related to, or speaking of window of time, how long do spring ephemerals typically last? Or at least the ones we saw at Lexington Lake.
Oh, as a longtime naturalist, and I know Sydney, you know this, but planning hikes during spring ephemeral season is really hard. Because we have some years where if it's like 80 degrees in February, a lot of our understory species, a lot of our ephemerals may kick off pretty soon. And so generally the first one we see is bloodroot. And it started blooming maybe 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, and it's done. And now, we're transitioning off into they all have their own little individual window. So I would say by May, really that first week of May, the window is past because I think the bluebells are past their prime right about now. and a lot of the other species. So we really have this mid-April window, unless we have a really crazy hot February that kicks everything off earlier in March. But yeah, it can be really hit or miss if we plan a hike too late into April and it's really warm out, the bloodroot's done.
Yeah, for sure. I do appreciate that like you said, every plant has its moment. And so you can end up being out in the woods and see multiple things in bloom. Even if some things are ending, you'll see the start of some other plants. Like I know bellwort is blooming right now, and it does tend to have a little bit of a longer bloom time, which is kind of cool. Um, so I mentioned that you have your own native garden at home. Someone's asking, actually Dina's asking, can you plant spring ephemerals in your garden? And have you done that yourself?
I personally haven't done it, and our seed team between JC Purity and KC Wildlands, this year we really moved for direct seeding. That when we collect an ephemeral and we want to move it to another location, we ask our expert volunteers to immediately replant it. And so in the past, we've put them in refrigerators and tried to um, hold on to them for a while and then move them. But we've really gone to direct seeding, taking that seed and immediately taking to the new location. We want to get it started while it's still fresh, the same way the natural system would do it. And but yeah, I don't personally have anything other than just some. I love just really drought tolerant prairie species, and I would be devastated to have some beautiful ephemerals and have rabbits in my front yard eat them all. And so I'd be saddened to have a beautiful ephemeral in my front yard and then lose it to my neighborhood rabbits.
Yeah, I hear you. Thinking about what all was blooming in the woods while we were there, Bob Burkebile is actually asking, what about the dogwoods? Do you ever see any dogwoods in eastern Kansas, Matt?
We don't really. Dogwood is more of a Missouri species, the dogwood that you traditionally see in that beautiful Ozark understory. And so we've got gray dogwood out in our prairies and things like that. But yeah, we're not going to have those flowering dogwoods to be very common. I think the Hidden Valley may have some over in the Northland. I think I've seen them over there, but we don't really traditionally see much in the understory of our Johnson County forests.
Yeah, I know they are actually at peak right now down in the Ozarks at Fiery Forks Conservation Area is a good place. You can go visit them and some other places in the Ozarks. So, Bob, sounds like you need to take a road trip. Okay, I've got a handful more questions for you. So speak again on the topic of a native garden in your home setting. Do you have any suggestions on natives that can be planted near ephemerals? Like as they disappear, something could help fill that space when they're dormant. Any recommendations?
Yeah, I know this is one of your favorite plants, but I know Pachyra is one of those wonderful species that's blooming right now in kind of our open woodlands, and they create kind of a nice understory, and they really fill in as almost like a native ground cover. And so Pachyra obovata is probably one of my favorites that I like to see kind of filling in the voids in between if you were trying to do ephemerals. And one of the issues we run into is that there are ephemerals available from native landscapers, but a lot of them have their genetics aren't local. And so I've toyed with buying trays of ephemerals and getting them started in some woodland restorations. But a lot of times Taylor Creek and some of our other awesome nurseries, they work across the Midwest, and it might have Tennessee origins or Arkansas origins. And we've just been a little nervous about doing ephemerals from other regions. And so we've toyed with doing some installations, but the ecotypes maybe just not quite close enough for us.
Can you elaborate on that just a little bit more? What about bringing a different ecotype in gives you all pause? It's an important conversation.
Yeah, so generally speaking, in our habitat restoration or forest and prairie work, we generally are going to use seed sources within probably 200 miles of Johnson County is our goal, 200 to 300 miles away. And we'll use some Northern Ozark seed sources occasionally for projects, but once you start getting to seed sources from Tennessee and the St. Louis area and further east, they don't tend to do well, or things that are from way too far north as well. So we try to find things from the Great Plains as seed sources.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Craig is asking about ferns. So we got just a brief glimpse of ferns in today's segment. Can you talk a little bit about what species of ferns are seen at Lexington Lake Park or maybe even some of the other adjacent parks?
Yeah, so I'm not a fern expert.
I can tell
they're
you.
not my jam. I can't remember was it the brittle fern?
It's
What was
lowland brittle fern. Yeah.
Yeah, so we saw the brittle fern there, and then we'll see the walking ferns at Lexington Lake, and we'll see them at Cedar Niles. And so we don't see a ton of fern diversity like we do on the Missouri side, but those are a couple of the species that we regularly see in our parks. But we've never done an exhaustive inventory of ferns of Johnson County. Maybe some folks at KU have, but my team hasn't been able to go out and do that kind of survey work yet.
Yeah, that does make sense. Okay, let's see here. Oh, okay. We're gonna talk about pawpaws here for a minute. And so Terry is asking when we showed that pawpaw blossom, it looked like a shoot. Is that off of a tree or a bush? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's a tree, and they're generally rhizomatous, and they're gonna have a big colony of pawpaws, is what we see. And pawpaw season in Johnson County, when you want the fruits, you're really fighting the deer, depending on how big they get in the understory. But they are trees, and they do, I believe, need to be cross-pollinated. So having an individual tree in your yard isn't very helpful, or you've got to get a couple different seed sources to really get them rolling. But yeah, we see pawpaw. I don't take them for granted, and I know folks in Chicago, they're not that common once you get a little further east and north of here. And so there's such a neat species to have. I personally don't grow them in my yard, but our streamway corridors are where a lot of our parkland is, and we really focus on purchasing land and doing work along Cedar Creek and Mill Creek and Coffee Creek, and we have just huge profusions of pawpaw in our forest understories down along our streamways. And so it's just they're a phenomenal species to have, and bush honeysuckle really pushes them out. And we've removed almost 1,000 acres of it, and really allowed these pawpaws to have a little more breeding room, and be able to be there and not get pushed out.
A couple facts about pawpaws that I forgot to mention in the today's episode is, and thank you for this, Julie. Pawpaws are the host plant for the zebra swallowtail. So it's not just all about the blooms, even though those stinky blooms on pawpaws are really cool, in my opinion. But a lot of our native insects, especially the soft-bodied larvae of butterflies and moths, like our caterpillars, depend on things more than just blooms, right? They're eating the leaves, they're eating the roots, and some of them are such specialists that they can't survive without them. And that zebra swallowtail relationship with the pawpaw is a great example of that. Just another fun factoid that I just remembered also is pawpaw is the only tropical fruit that grows here in the Midwest native. We don't have other tropical fruits that grow here in our area. So I think that's a pretty cool thing to consider. Okay. You had mentioned that you all do a lot of invasive species removal. Alexander says, other than honeysuckle and garlic mustard, what are some emerging or other regional invasive species we should be aware of? Great question, Alex.
Yeah, when we're out dealing with bush honeysuckle, we're seeing more and more burning bush. You'd be kind of surprised. It's a very common uh, ornamental that is in a lot of homes from the 70s and 80s. But we're seeing more and more burning bush in the understory. It's beginning to pop up. We'll see privet. Privet will also pop up in the understories. Those are two of our biggest issues. One of the good things we're seeing in the woodlands right now is viburnum. So black haw viburnum is blooming right now all over our forest understories, and making sure people understand we do have lots of really good shrubs that you can use in your yard instead of things like privet, and instead of burning bush that you can buy that black haw viburnum that kind of fills that same void. They're an awesome one.
Mm-hmm. Cheryl Venzer mentions Himalayan blackberry is an invasive. I think that's. Do you have that on the Kansas side? I know that's on the Missouri side for sure.
Yeah, so we deal with the rubus species and out in our prairies. They're a big prairie issue. We don't tend to have them like they do on the west coast of the Himalayan blackberry, where you have these huge colonies, thickets of them on the roadsides. But blackberry is a huge issue in some of our prairies.
Okay, we got just a couple more questions before I dive into them, I want to remind you all, we do a pop quiz. And for today's pop quiz, here are the rules. So it's going to be the first person to answer this question correctly in the chat. So make sure you pull the chat up now, and get ready. So in today's episode, I mentioned, Miramacokery is roughly translated to what in ancient Greek and Roman languages. Doesn't have to be exactly verbatim, but if you can get pretty close. Oh, and I think we already right out the gate. I think we've got an answer. And what you're gonna win today, Karen, you're the first person to get it. Dale, you were a close second. It is ant dance and circle, or circular ant dance. That's what Miramacokery, that's where that word derives from, that phrase. But Karen, you have won a pair of tickets to join us for one of our future hikes. So whether you can make it to this weekend or join myself and Johnson County Parks and Rec at Big Bull Creek in May, and we have a couple other hikes later in the year. Congratulations, you have won a free pair of tickets to one of our guided naturalist walks. So I will message you following, actually, rather, Karen, send me a message and I will get you in contact with our ticketing service so that we can get you signed up for one of our walks. So congratulations. And Susan, to find out about our hikes that we're doing in the spring, summer, and fall, you can visit us online at deeproots.org. Right there at the top, we have our events and how to get involved, and you can click that and see our guided naturalist walk. Okay, now for our final question of the day. Oh, actually, no, I've got two more questions. Tranny Keeley is asking about serviceberry. Do you have any serviceberry there at Lexington Lake Park?
I personally have not seen it. It barely makes it into eastern Kansas. I have a beautiful one in my backyard, and I've seen it in Swope Park quite a bit. I haven't seen a lot of serviceberry in Johnson County, so it's around, but it's not. I see it more on the Missouri side personally. I see it in yard landscapes and native plantings, and there's some beautiful examples of it at Rocky Point Glade at not Shawnee Mission, at Swope Park. And so that's where I see it a lot, like on bluffs and ledges, forested slopes. But for some reason, yeah, we didn't really see any when we were out visiting Lexington. One thing we didn't talk about, I love the stacked stone walls at Lexington Lake. It's not something you think you're going to see. That's more something you see in the Flint Hills. But there's over 2 miles of just limestone stacked fence that has just been taken back over by the forest. And it's phenomenal when you're out there and in the understory and these beautiful stacked fences out there.
Really cool. I love it. And it makes for really great reptile habitat.
It
So
does.
big fan of that. Okay, and our final question today from Val, and thank you all for all your wonderful questions today. But Val is asking, is it necessary for an elizome to be removed before removed before the seed germinates, or is it only a distribution ploy?
Great question.
A great question. It's one I actually don't know. I did a little bit of extra research on it. And Matt, do you want to answer this, or do you want me to
Yeah,
jump?
I mean, I can, but the best of my knowledge is that the ants will actually remove it when they get to the nest. And when they do that, they like scarify the seed. And it helps it germinate, is my best understanding, is that they actually will separate it, and it'll favor germination once it's removed.
That's a great answer. And I think it checks out to me, but that's a great question, Val, and you have stumped our experts today. So all right, folks. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. I am going to go ahead and pull up my screen real quick because I want to show you insight to our next episode. If you join us on May 1st at noon, I will be with Ginger Miller of Missouri Department of Conservation talking about wild foraging. So we'll be looking at plants that you can find in your yard, both native and non-native, that can be used for eating. So we'll be walking and talking, and then Ginger will be demonstrating how to make and prepare some of these foods. So tune in next time, and until then, happy gardening.